When looking at the arrival dates of birds, it is important to remember that some birds are short-distance migrants and others are long-distance migrants. There are two migratory seasons for birds, one in the spring and one in the autumn. According to a study of migration timing change, the first arrival dates have been getting earlier each year, with certain species arriving much earlier than the mean average, such as a ruby-crowned kinglet. The change is not bad for most species. In fact, the averages are as follows. Short-distance migrants increase at about 3.9 days per decade, and long-distance migrants increase at about 2 days per decade. The rate of early arrival of the short-distance migrants is almost twice as fast as the long-distance migrants. The reason for this drastic difference in short-distance migrant arrival dates and long-distance migrant arrival dates in the US is because birds that winter in the southern USA are affected more directly by the passage of cold fronts that bring colder weather to the northeast United States during the spring. Consequently, they can move gradually northward in response to favourable conditions. Short-distance migrants arrive much earlier in comparison with long-distance migrants, and often nearly 3 times as early. Depending on vegetation and other sources of food, animals must go where they can meet the energy requirements of their body. Some species of birds live on berries and seeds, and thus must go to areas producing this type of food source. If the berries and seeds are produced earlier and earlier in the year, then the bird must arrive at an earlier time. Birds must be supported by the food they eat in order to travel the long distances. The sun drives these processes, so it is important that we take this into perspective when reviewing bird migration. The sun is what warms up the earth and alters the food supply. If the food supply is mature at an earlier time, then the birds can and actually have to be ready to migrate at those times. Temperature is the most important factor affecting breeding time. Organisms that breed earlier in the season tend to produce healthier offspring that have better means of survival. This is the same for birds. This is due to the birds being in the same area they were born and getting a better chance to mature before having to fly a long distance. When an organism is born earlier, they are able to get to the food supply without the competition that would exist once there are more offspring born later in the breeding season. Food supply is usually not a problem, as if the temperature is increased for the birds enough to migrate, then the food should be ready for them. The main determinant of spring migration is the temperature and food source, as birds cannot migrate to another area if there is no food. However, in the autumn, the reproductive season is another factor. A bird cannot migrate if breeding is not complete. When the reproductive season is over, the birds are able to migrate. Of course, with birds laying eggs earlier in the spring, and their reproductive periods coming to an end earlier in the autumn and can leave earlier. This results in higher survival rates of birds. There's definitely a change occurring for birds. Many birds' arrival times are somewhat different than they were a decade ago. Habitats had to be ready to support the earlier arrivals. Reproduction period is starting earlier, but birds are readjusting well to the new temperatures and will have to continue to do so since global warming is becoming more and more intense.